All right, this is Standard 2, Learning Differences, which I did a lesson on the story of Thanksgiving for. It was hard to incorporate all of the kind of elements into this standard. But basically, instead of just telling them the Thanksgiving story, I tried to both make it a little more engaging and a little more relevant. So we kind of started with some of the terms. This was a little bit of a review. We'd kind of gone over the story a little bit a couple of days before, but tried to start basically with key terms like pilgrims, Native Americans, different kinds of foods, where they came from, and go from there into fuller sentences and fuller ideas with the story. And I tried to kind of track the kids, especially the younger kids, a lot by just calling back to what we had learned, some of those words and ideas, as we went through the story. And for the story itself, I tried to use some props and a globe, and I used little Native Americans and pilgrims that had the faces of the younger kids from the school, so they thought that was funny. Then big thing was at the end talking about how both sides probably felt, how you would feel if you were alone in a new place you didn't know, feelings of being thankful for people who shared with us. So that was basically most of the big points. And then, who are we thankful for? What are some things that we are thankful for? Those are kind of the main beats I was trying to hit.
I did see that you were using the visual props. I saw the globe, and I saw the pictures, the little pilgrims and the Native Americans with their pictures on them. So you were using a lot of props, something to engage the kids' interest. And you did get them to get interested in it once they saw their faces on there. Oh, and I saw that you kept having them repeat some of the words, but not having them repeat. But after you introduced some of the key phrases or words to the kids, as you progressed through that little lesson, you kept asking them, and like, who was there?
And some of them I was trying to target kids who, say, like, if one kid couldn't answer the question, who came from England. If they couldn't answer it, kind of when it came up again, going back and giving them more chances to answer the same question. So just to make sure that some of the kids who were struggling were kind of tracking the ideas.
Right.
So I was trying to keep track of who was following what.
That was a good way to get there, to track their interest and to see if they were even paying attention.
I also then at the end, trying to keep in mind which kids were struggling with what ideas. We played a game with the food where every kid got a kind of targeted question, or a few targeted questions that I thought were kind of appropriate to their age level or understanding of the content.
Right.
So for some of the older kids, I give them bigger idea questions. For the younger kids, give them simpler questions like, what's an orange Thanksgiving food? Pumpkin. But for the older kids, like, how do you think the pilgrims felt?
Kept it much more simple to get them to respond rather than have to overthink anything, so that they were part of the conversation at hand at that moment. So you were really good at recognizing the level of ability for each individual child.
Thank you. Yeah, trying to make sure everyone was involved to the best of their ability.
Yeah,
and I tried even for, So, who has trouble giving appropriate responses to questions. He's a smart boy, it is one of his individual problems. Was just like giving him chances, going back to him until he was giving a correct answer, and when he did, giving him a lot of praise for it, even if it was a pretty simple response. I know that for him, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I think, and then that's another thing you recognize, that like, that they're struggling, so you praise them with the small things, because that's like to kind of a building block for them to move forward from there. They know, like, okay, so let's just keep working with that, rather than trying to keep them in a universal level. They're all advanced or something. Praise the small things, and you recognize that. That's a good thing.
Yeah, and hopefully every bit of praise is one step closer to getting to the high expectation bar.
Right.
So I tried to bring in some of the thankfulness, and appreciating people's difference. There's some things I tried to put into the lesson.
Yeah, and you did put that in, and about how the Native Americans helped the pilgrims, and how the pilgrims helped the Native Americans,
and how we help each other, we should all be thankful for each other.
Yeah, and you didn't just keep it in that realm of story where it was about the Native Americans and the pilgrims, but you also talked outside of that, like how we all as people will help each other and everything. You did talk about that. so you brought out a lot of props. You had the cutouts of the Native Americans and the Pilgrims. You had the globe and the fruits or the vegetables. You had a box of fruits there too.
For the game, yeah.
Right. And then that was another thing. You had the game there, so you had already prepared the game ahead of time, so that after going through this lesson, they had a little game to come back to and to keep them more engaged.
Yeah, and I tried to keep it where like every section of the lesson had more challenging and a little bit easier elements in it, so
Right.
it wasn't a challenging section, an easy section. So you'd lose kids were struggling, and then later on in the challenging section or an easy section, lose the kids who are already a bit more advanced.
Right.
You know, and we have a really small class, so we
Yeah.
know all the kids really well. So it usually isn't very obvious if we're giving a question deliberately to a kid because we know that this is an area they need to work on.
Right.
Not exposing the kids, but making it obvious that you're calling anybody out
Yeah,
on something. So I'd say, yeah, like with kids like so, just giving them multiple chances with the same question until you can get the correct answer.
Right.
With some of the older kids, giving them the more challenging questions. We don't really have too many special needs issues.
No.
So there wasn't really much of a chance to show off special needs education.
Yeah, again, but I guess that falls into the other one we had over here, valuing students. I think as we know the students, you separated the questions or the abilities of what they would answer, how they would answer and for example with So, knowing that he might have trouble with it, you kept going back to him with the same one, and then praising him afterwards when he finally got it, and allowing like the much more advanced kids give more, and even following up with that and like, well, why or what?
First we went over all the material together,
Right.
but then using the book to kind of ask the same questions again,
Right.
and to target the kids who maybe weren't understanding too well the first time, just to make sure that they were all understanding the core concepts.
Yeah.
Before moving on to what I guess would have been like the summative assessment, like the final assessment with the game. So then I could really target the kids with kind of developmentally appropriate questions, or questions that I think are at their appropriate level. So I tried to incorporate assessments into the lesson and make sure that they were assessments that I could scale up or down depending on the student.
Right.
So yeah, again, the bar wasn't set the same for every kid.
Right. No, I think you did good with that.
I tried to call back to countries that we know. Tried to talk about the way people might have felt, the way the Pilgrims may have felt, the Native Americans might have felt, and just the fact that different places are different around the world, which is a basic concept. These are 5 and 6 year olds.
Right. You did that too with Christmas just the other day as well. But that's a different lesson. Sorry, we're talking.
That's all right.
An instructional practice to help students learn to respect and understand the diversity of the local community, nation, and globe. Well, I guess you did talk about that with. I mean, we use that a lot. We always talk about what about in this culture? Do you think they do it this way? And I think with the Thanksgiving one, I mean, because the focus was mainly on those two parts of the world, I guess. That was the main point of the story, so I'd say it's a little hard to touch up on like the whole... Well, I mean, we went through it though. Yeah, you did, because the two differences, you talked about the differences between the Pilgrims and the way they lived and how they didn't know how to hunt or they didn't know how to do certain things, and the Native Americans, how they helped out with that. And you talked about, so I guess I keep saying I guess, but it helped them understand that, you had the English coming over and not knowing how to do certain things that they had to learn from a different culture, and then the different culture passing on that to them and then getting something back as well.
Yeah, so differences usually means that there's things that we can learn and gain from other people's, not differences being something that makes them hard to understand or different from us. Sharing is good.
Right. And I think you put that into the story, in the story of the Thanksgiving, you talked about how the Pilgrims were struggling through the first winter. They didn't know how to grow things. So I think, you hit the mark there. I guess it would hit that.
Great. And then the last one I think we talked about a little bit was English language learners, which we do a lot with, but I tried to follow the kind of standard ESL, go from vocabulary to sentences, modeling correct sentences, using a lot of like listening and repeating for either vocabulary or sentences. So I tried to put that in as much as possible.
Yeah, you did real well with that, because you introduced the vocabulary first. Before you did any of that story stuff, you went over some of the vocabulary. You did it in a slow ESL process. You think you did? You did well with that, you know. And then not just that, but you had the aid, like you had flashcards. You didn't just
visual aids.
You had visual aids. You didn't just have them like saying what these things were. You had visual aids of everything. Yeah, so I think it helped out with the kids understanding what we were talking about. And rather than just speaking about a pilgrim or a Native American, you had those visual aids for the kids to recognize, and you kept them You kept them available for the kids to to look at when you pointed the words or even say the words. They could go back to that as a reference. After that, you started modeling the sentences for the kids. Yeah, I think you did good.
Great, thank you.